what's up, guys? Blaine Duncan here from Halloween Lives, the podcast of Michael Myers, joined, as always, week after week by my brother, my partner in crime, and my co-host, Austin. What's up, dude? How you doing?
I'm doing good, dude. We are a week away from a very exciting episode of Halloween Lives.
Hell yeah.
You and I have been doing prep work, getting things ready to go. And it's going to be just like a really fun time. I think of it like a broadcast special of Halloween Lives, and it's going to be super fun.
Dude, we mentioned this last week, but we've got a ton of people who want to join the show that night. If you are one of them and you've not sent us a DM, please do so on Instagram. Hit us up at halloween.lives.podcast. Send us a DM. Let us know that you want to be on the show with us. We're going to try to get every single person on for like 5-10 minutes. Just have a fun time, chat a little bit, talk about your favorite Halloween movies, your favorite Halloween moments, whatever it might be. But yeah, dude, last night you and I were obviously together. We were trying out a few things, making sure that we don't have any major snafus or gremlins the night of the show. But we are exactly 1 week away. It's July 7th. It's going to be 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you want to be there, let us know. We'll shoot you the link. And if you're not interested in being on the show, but you just want to watch, well, you'll be able to do that via YouTube as well. So make sure you guys are, paying close attention to our YouTube page. And we're going to be damn happy to have you with us and to celebrate. And man, it's 25 episodes. That's huge for us. We didn't, we were kind of, when we started this show, we weren't exactly sure what we had going on. And as we've mentioned, when we started the show, we weren't even sure that it was going to be a weekly show. And then we just found out that we enjoyed it so much. And so week after week after week, here we are. It's episode number 24. Next week, live 25. And it's going to be the first of many live episodes that we're going to start doing moving forward, which is pretty cool. So very excited to be doing that. But I'm even more excited to be here tonight to be talking about what we're going to be discussing tonight, which is basically how Michael compares to Freddy and Jason. So Michael versus Freddy versus Jason, however you want to combine those three and how they really compare. So that's really what we're going to be discussing tonight and kind of taking a little bit of a deep dive into, I don't want to say deep dive, but looking at that 10,000 foot view of each series, how they compare, how they intertwine, and really how they sort of fed off of each other in a major way. Now we're talking about 80s slashers here, right? I mean, obviously we know Halloween started 1978. That was really the one that kind of got it started. Also, we've excluded Leatherface. We've excluded Texas Chainsaw. There was a Mount Rushmore of slashers. Of course, Leatherface would be up there. But for tonight's episode, we're just talking about Freddy and Jason and Michael. So we're going to kind of talk about those 80s, those diehard 80s movies, and really that competition that was going on between those three. And we should say that you and I are huge Friday the 13th fans. I mean, obviously we're huge Halloween fans. We're huge Friday the 13th fans. There you go. Yeah, I don't think you can see it, but it's way up there. I've got my Michael Myers or my Jason Voorhees mask. We're huge fans of Friday the 13th, but we're also big fans of A Nightmare on Elm Street. And I would even say, well, I know for a fact I saw the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. I saw actually both Nightmare on Elm Street and I saw many of the Friday the 13th movies before I even saw Halloween 1978. Did you know that?
I did not know that, but I think like when I think back to us as kids, I think Jason Voorhees is what got me into horror movies. I don't think I'd be this big Michael Myers fan if it weren't for those Friday the 13th films that were on rotation all the time from the time we were kids. I mean, those were sort of, at least for me, it was my intro to horror. And then obviously like the Michael Myers was a thing and it was around and eventually it became, the big thing for me.
Right.
But for the longest time, man, it was Jason Voorhees was my number one. Obviously, I went through a huge Freddy phase 2. And those movies are so special to us. I mean, last night when we were together, we were talking about Wes Craven's New Nightmare.
Yeah, we were watching. We had Wes Craven's New Nightmare put on the TV on television as we were working on the show for the 7th. Yeah, I mean yeah, you're right. I mean, like Friday the 13th really here's the thing. I remember being a kid and writing like a Friday the 13th script. Friday the 13th was and still is very, very important to me as a horror franchise. It's just that my love for Halloween has just grown so much that nothing compares to it. But let's talk a little bit about each character, meaning more so obviously Freddy and Jason, because we already know a lot about Michael. If you're watching this, you're a big fan of Michael Myers, so you probably know a lot about him. But let's talk just a little bit about both characters and really how those series came to be. And then I really want to discuss that competition that was between the two of them. So let's start out. Let's talk about, by the way, if you see my shirt is wet, it's not because I'm sweating. It's because the neighborhood kids sprayed me with a squirt gun like 7 minutes before we went on the air, and I didn't change my shirt. So I apologize. I'm going to probably actually go stand outside of his window tonight with my Michael Myers mask on and get some revenge. So
don't believe him. He's lactating. He is lactating.
It's true. It's true. No, let's talk about Freddy for a second. What do you like about Freddy Krueger?
So Freddy has something that the other two do not right off the bat, and that is the ability of being vocal. And you've got this character, at least in the first one, he's not very comedic. There's not a whole lot of you don't see too much into.
He's scary. He's scary.
Yeah, he's a scary dude in the first one, and I still think he's scary in the other ones, but he kind of becomes more into the character that I think a lot of people think of with Freddy as the sequels go on. But I think that is a huge differentiating factor is the motivation is super clear with Freddy. He will tell you what's going on. I mean, they have to kind of investigate the situation and how he got to where he's at. But he's vocal, and it's sort of more of a cat and mouse thing where he likes to, torture his victims, play with them psychologically before making his kill. And he's got I think the other two, Jason included, Freddy and Jason both kind of have a supernatural aspect, but I think Freddy is at a much higher level of that. He's literally, coming from hell. He gets tortured by the demons, and now he's this nightmare demon guy. But I think that's like probably the biggest thing, like kind of tone wise, is you get this character who is speaking to his victims. And obviously I can't go any further without mentioning that Robert Englund is the GOAT. He is amazing. You and I have had the pleasure of meeting him at a convention in Minneapolis, and he was the sweetest guy. Signed my Freddy glove, the whole nine, and his voice and his
only cost us like $100. Only cost us like $100 to meet him. I mean, what's money? What's money when you're wanting to meet a horror icon?
Right, exactly, and that's going to be nothing compared to what we're doing here in a couple months.
Oh God. But warn my bank right now. They're going to see a lot of transactions for stupid stuff that I shouldn't be buying at my age.
Right. In Los Angeles. Yeah. No, I'm going to get a call from Wells Fargo.
There's for sure going to be an alert put on my account. I'm going to be like going up to get I don't even know, Jamie Lee Curtis. Not that she's been announced, even though we think she's going to be there. I'm going to be like going up to get Jamie Lee Curtis's account and be like, I'm going to go to her autograph. I'm going to go swipe my card at the ATM to get some more cash out, because it's going to cost me like $250 to get her autograph, and it's going to be like denied.
Yep.
Denied. I'm going to be on the phone with my bank, and they're like, sorry, we got a 48-hour hold on your account. A rage.
Yeah, you just spent $1,000 in Los Angeles after being in Minneapolis for the last 2 years.
Right. All right. Anyway, I digress. I went off on a tangent.
Robert Englund is the man. I don't think that character works without him, and I think to a degree that was proven with the Nightmare on Elm Street remake. Even though I am a personal fan of that film, I think the actor who played him in that film was Jackie Earl Haley. He played Rorschach in the Watchmen movies, but he was great in that role, but it's so hard to compare to a guy like Freddy. That's one thing with Jason and Michael. You can have different actors playing the character and it works. But with Freddy, it's really hard, and I struggle thinking of who could play Freddy if they were to do a reboot. But that character, so much of that falls on the actor of Robert Englund, and I think that his personality is sort of what stands out to me. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think you bring up a really good point, right? I mean, we saw Jackie Earle Haley do Freddy in the remake, but here was the thing, and I get it, right? It's a remake. They're trying to make it their own. That wasn't Freddy Krueger there. I mean, what you were seeing, I actually, even though I liked like his look, like it was a great burn victim. It looked much more like a real burn victim than, like the pepperoni face Freddy Krueger that we get in a couple of the sequels. But that wasn't, it wasn't, Robert Englund, like you said, I mean, it just wasn't. So it's much easier to throw a hockey mask on a dude who's 6'3" and put him in kind of raggedy clothing and give him a machete and say, hey, congratulations, you're Jason Voorhees, than it is to put makeup and prosthetics and things like that. And then not only that, but it's a speaking role, which is different. That's a different avenue, because you have Freddy Krueger who speaks, then you have Jason and Michael and Leatherface and I guess Ghostface. I guess you could, he does speak sort of, right? He's got the voice changer thing, but Freddy is one of the only slashers who actually speaks. So to take away Robert's voice and to not have that same, and that same character within his voice, it takes a lot away. And personally for me, you mentioned that you're a fan of the remake. I'm not a huge fan of the remake. I don't think it's a bad film. It's just not a great film in my mind. And I think one of the main reasons that I'm not a film is because, he's not in it. Right. So, but that's a really good point. Here's where I think the Freddy Krueger franchise kicks the shit out of every other franchise out there in one particular category: marketing. I'm a kid of the 80s. I remember being a kid and Freddy Krueger, dude, was everywhere. Like, I remember going to the grocery store as a kid, like 80s, 90s. And I remember going to the grocery store and they'd always have like the little toy aisle, like, not a big section of toys, but some toys, right? Little trinkets and shit like that. And dude, I remember I had like a Freddy Krueger yo-yo that I got from the grocery store. I had like a Freddy Krueger like stretch doll kind of thing that I remember getting. I had a Freddy Krueger, like these squeeze balls that you use in the bathtub that you'd fill up with water. And I actually had a Jason and a Freddy one. And dude, I wish I still had those things, man, because not only the nostalgic piece for me is like my toys from being a kid, but they're probably worth a lot of money too, or maybe worth a little bit of money. But this amazing job with A Nightmare on Elm Street and just the marketing of those movies and making Freddy sort of a pop culture icon. And you get that a little bit with Friday the 13th because the hockey mask is so identifiable, like Christmas Vacation, right? I mean, you see him come out with things where it's they're referencing Jason, right? They're referencing Friday the 13th. And I think it was even after Halloween 2018 was made, Jamie Lee Curtis was asked by an ET reporter, like, what was it like the first time you saw him put the hockey mask on? And she looked like she was ready to murder that dude. And I would be too, like, you don't even know what you're talking about here. But anyway, I think Friday or the Nightmare on Elm Street did such a great job marketing with action figures and comic books and just like building this character up of Freddy. Like I remember Freddy being on MTV when I was a kid. There was this huge buildup. And I think they touch on that maybe a little bit, not purposely, but they do touch on that a little bit with in A New Nightmare when like he goes on the talk show, when Freddy shows up at the talk show. Oh, dude. And we can't forget about the fact that they had like the Freddy gloves that they sold. Like every kid had the Freddy glove that came in the package. I know I had a couple of them throughout the years, and I've actually they still sell them on eBay, like brand new, unopened, like 1980s and 90s gloves. And dude, I've almost pulled the trigger on those things a couple times because I would love to have one just because it's so cool. I wish I had my old one, but I don't. But that's where I think Halloween maybe missed the boat a little bit, and they've done a good job in recent years of doing like the NECA toys and, doing like just different marketing for, like branding and things like that, t-shirts. And obviously you've got like the Trick or Treat Studios masks and all that kind of thing. But I mean, when I was a kid, there was no Michael Myers toys. There was no Michael Myers action figures. There was nothing. So that's where I think Nightmare on Elm Street, that franchise just kicked the hell out of the other two, meaning Friday the 13th and Halloween.
That is so weird to think about. Like, these movies are rated R, and in theory, you shouldn't be any younger than 17 without the accompanied parent or supervisor. But they're marketing yo-yos to kids. It's crazy. And I think that sort of brand awareness that the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise has sort of plays into the lore of Freddy Krueger, where he's in your nightmares. And I think that brings a different kind of fear, because theoretically you could watch A Nightmare on Elm Street, go to bed, and have a nightmare of Freddy Krueger. And that's like, they're doing the whole thing right there. Whereas, if you live in I guess for Jason, if you're not in the woods, you're probably fine. I guess Michael's a little bit more suburban. You could be kind of targeted by him whenever. But the Freddy thing is kind of a different kind of threat, because in your dreams it can feel real. And I'm sure there are plenty of stories of people who have had real nightmares of Freddy Krueger. And yeah, you see him all day. He's going to be in your subconscious. No, that's crazy for me to hear. I was thinking about the plastic gloves that you mentioned. I think every household had one, and every single one had like chewed tips of the fingers. I don't know why the blades of those things were so delicious looking. But I'm almost positive that I did the same thing. But yeah, no, that is true. And I haven't really thought about that, how important, or how broad the marketing of A Nightmare on Elm Street was, because even to this day it's a guaranteed thing to see at Spirit Halloween is a Freddy Krueger glove and mask and sweater. Mm-hmm. And there hasn't been a movie in 13 years.
That's a great point. Yeah, I mean, and I think they've gotten better. Like Spirit, there is like, you can get like the Haddonfield, hat, and like you'll see obviously the Tots masks and things like that. But you're right. I mean, before Trick or Treat Studios became a big company, you could almost always guarantee that there was going to be Freddy stuff, maybe Jason stuff. I mean, the shitty plastic, hockey mask was you could probably find that. And I know they've done a lot of different combos over the years. You could buy it was like a foam mask, like a foam Jason mask with the machete. You could get like that kind of stuff. But dude, there was nothing for Michael Myers. Like, I remember you and I I mean, obviously I'm older than you, but I remember us, like, mom and dad taking us to some costume store, driving us all over the freaking place, because I had found out that they had the old like Don Post mask, like the old Halloween mask, and wanting that. And that was, I think, post Resurrection, because Resurrection was my first mask. But it was hard to find a Michael Myers mask back in the day, but you could always find Freddy stuff. You could always, like you said, the sweater, the glove, like you could find that kind of stuff. You could always find a Jason, mask or something like that. And the Jason costume isn't difficult to pull off, because you could just wear I remember as a kid, kids would be out trick-or-treating and they just wear like a plaid button-up shirt and throw on a Jason mask and carry a knife or a machete, and that was like, oh shit, it's Jason, and so that you didn't get that with Halloween, and that's where it kind of sucks for us as kids, but we obviously get to kind of reap the benefits of that today.
Right. Yeah, I think we are more than making up for it. If you just take a look at our rooms right now. But yeah, no, that's so true. I remember going out looking for The Mask by Don Post. Right.
The Mask, yeah.
And bringing that home and being like, oh, this is the one from like the old movies. You couldn't really tell how different it was back then. It was just nice to have an actual Michael Myers mask. But yeah, I mean, I
Whatever
remember
happened to that thing.
Dude, it melted in your closet. Do you remember that?
It melted in my closet? I don't.
It like we must have had the heat
like
off.
Like fused together. Like it was like crumpled up, and then we like took it out, and it was all like, yeah, I do remember that now that you say that. Yeah,
it was stuck to the walls, dude. It was like
we must have lived with, like, our parents must have had some freaking high temperatures upstairs or something.
Yeah, man. I don't know if we had the air off one year or what the deal was, but yeah, no,
That's
it was
crazy.
It was completely melted. I ended up getting one later on in life and converting it into a really shitty version of Rob Zombie's H2. But yeah, man, we always had the glove. We would always do like the fake burn prosthetics. You like put them in the microwave and stick them on your face and actually burn your face, trying to get that burn face look. But yeah, man, I think the problem with the Nightmare on Elm Street series, though, is pretty much from 1 on, excluding New Nightmare, it seriously goes down. I mean, Freddy's dead, and I know there are people who love those films too, and I think they're great for their campiness and sort of that nostalgia feeling. But man, those movies, as far as like objective quality, I think it really goes down as time goes on, where you don't see that with a franchise like Halloween. There's kind of ebbs and flows, and it goes up and down. But yeah, no, Nightmare on Elm Street.
I like some of them. I like some of them. Like I like Part 2. I like Dream Warriors. I like A New Nightmare. Freddy's Dead holds a special place in my heart just simply because it was the first one that I ever watched. Like that was the Freddy that I grew up with. Like I saw Freddy's Dead and then I saw the original. But I'd always go back to Freddy's Dead because it was kind of like the fun, campy. It was like 3D and there was a lot of kind of cool 90s elements to it. Like I even have on my horror mix on my phone off of iTunes. I've got the Goo Goo Dolls. They have a song called I'm Awake Now that's in Freddy's Dead, and that's part of, like, I work out to that song and shit like that. Like I love that sort of nostalgic feel that you get from listening to some of that kind of music. And there's some of those songs, like in Friday the 13th, His Eyes, that was in part 5. Like I don't remember her name, but she's like dancing in her bedroom to that like 80s pop song. And I think it's like Pseudo Echo or something is the name of the band that sings that. Yeah. And I love that. And that's the thing that was like, I felt like the thing that I love so much about Friday the 13th is, dude, it reeks of 80s. Like it is 80s to the core. And you and I were actually just texting here in the last couple of weeks. We're going to do a day this summer. We're going to get together and do like a Friday the 13th marathon kind of day. And because I feel like there's something, much like watching all the Halloween movies in October, there's something about watching the Friday the 13th films in the summer, because they're just summer films. Like I feel like a Nightmare on Elm Street, you can watch them all year long, at least in my opinion. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, you can watch them all year long. Scream, you can watch them all year long. There's something, even though a Friday the 13th could be Friday, December 13th, it always takes place in the summer. It's like a summer camp, vibe feel to it. And so I want, what I said to you is like, I want to have like a Friday the 13th day. We just sit around and watch Friday the 13th films,
Yeah, dude. You kind of need the leaves to be bright and green and the woods to be full when you're watching those movies. I think, like you were saying, that nostalgic 80s factor. I mean, you get so many of the heavy hitters in that franchise in the 80s. Most of the series takes place in the 80s. And I think the best example is probably Jason Takes Manhattan. That thing is literally oozing with 80s nostalgia and color palettes. But that franchise, man, it's really, like I said, what got me to love horror. the music is great. And they're a little bit different than the other two, where I think they kind of had to punt a little bit once they realized the success of part two was so much better than part one, having a different killer, and then going, all right, well, I think this is our guy moving forward. Right. And you know, Jason he's probably not as big as Michael Myers, but the two are synonymous to people who don't really care too much about horror movies. You know, every time I've explained to somebody that, you know, I do this podcast, they'll be like, oh, is that Michael's the one with the hockey mask, right? And, you know, that's just, the two are so similar. They're silent killers. They are, you know, their motivation is a little unclear. They're not killing for revenge or anything like that. Well, I guess Jason is killing.
Jason is, but, yeah, yep.
But it's less personal, I guess. I don't know. The Friday the 13th series is just so extremely important to me as far as horror goes. And you know, I don't think it really it doesn't dip off until quite later in the series. How do you feel about Friday the 13th, man?
Yeah, I mean, I love Friday the 13th. Probably my least favorite of all of them. I mean, I don't like A New Blood that much. It's just too weird, like the whole psychic thing, the you know, the telekinesis, like that just, it's too bizarre for me. But probably my least favorite, honestly, of all of them is, and I'm not a huge fan of Jason Goes to Hell, but is the original. And I do think it's really interesting how they pivoted where, okay, they killed the mom and she's not around anymore. Pamela Voorhees, she got her head chopped off. She's not around anymore. So we need to stay relevant. We're competing now because that came out, I believe, in 1980. They're now competing against not only Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which came out, I believe, in 74, and you got Halloween, which came out in 78. You had some other films that had sort of come out around that same time where this slasher thing was really starting to pick up. Like you could smell this in the air that the 80s were going to be the slasher generation. And they were like, okay, we need to stay relevant. We need to stay on top of this. What can we do? Oh, well, guess what? At the end of Friday the 13th, you get that iconic scene where Jason jumps up out of the water and he grabs that girl and pulls her into the under the water. Such a great scene. I mean, one of the most classic horror scenes of any film throughout history. Just a super iconic scene. But what can we do to carry that on? Well, how about what if it's the kid who comes back and the kid is now a grown man and he is pissed off because not only is his mom dead, but these goddamn campers won't stop screwing around, smoking pot, doing shit that they shouldn't be doing in his area. So what's he going to do? He's going to murder them all. The series transitions so much because in Friday the 13th part 2, you had him in the hood, so Friday the 13th, you had no Jason really. Friday the 13th, you had Jason in the hood. Friday the 13th, and not the hood, but I mean like in a hood. Friday the 13th, he wasn't Jason takes the streets of Chicago. It was, Jason is still the campground. But you have then part 3, he gets the mask. And obviously, as you get further along, I mean, part 5, it's not even Jason, right? I mean, it's not even the real Jason. Part 6, they bring him back and he's basically a zombie. Part 7 and part 8, the dude he's like oozing. His bones are showing. He just looks nastier than hell. Part 9, they send his ass to hell. Then they're like, you know what? We sent him to hell. There's only one last place we can take him. Upstairs. We're going to space. Send him to space. That series, you want to talk about a roller coaster of a series. Friday the 13th is a roller coaster of a series.
Dude, I haven't thought about it like that, but that is so true, man. They are, the Friday the 13th series is constantly reinventing itself and kind of putting new scenarios in each time where I think people might, throw flack at some of the Halloween sequels for being very formulaic to the T, kind of a rehash of the last film. Jason's going all over the place, man. He is going to hell. He's going to space. Yeah. He's fighting Freddy. I don't know.
Can't forget about Freddy versus Jason.
Yeah, and that
do you like Freddy versus Jason?
Freddy versus Jason, I think is it suffers a lot from like the early 2000s style of horror movie in the same way that Halloween Resurrection does, and they came out a year apart from each other. But it was kind of before sort of the Michael Bay remake phase started taking off. And horror had kind of dipped off from their peak in the 80s to this like kind of shitty joke of itself by that point. And it wasn't until those remakes that kind of took things back and made things gritty and realistic that kind of breathed new life into the horror genre, or at least the slasher genre. Freddy versus Jason, I think, definitely suffers from that. I think the first few times I watched it, I really hated it. But as I've grown to just watch it more often, there are parts that I like about it. You got Jay and Silent Bob in there for some reason. The characters are extremely unlikable and forgettable.
Totally unlikable. Yeah.
But you do get it's not really a horror movie, it's like an action movie. That last scene, or that last battle between Freddy and Jason, is awesome. I love watching that. I remember the marketing going into that was so extreme. You and I were watching, like, this is in the era of like super old Flash websites. We would log on to freddyversusjason.com and watch like the counter go down, and we'd be so excited. And we were like, who's gonna win? It's kind of a tie. I guess most people probably who weren't as into it as us would have expected that, they're not gonna really have one win. But it was fun. It's kind of a roller coaster of a movie in its own right. But it's not one like I've got the Freddy versus Jason mask right here. I think the character design for Jason was great, where the character design for Freddy, that's definitely the most pepperoni pizza he really looks throughout that series. But you've got really cool visuals with Freddy too. You've got kind of the demon Freddy, the nightmare Freddy, where he's got like the sharp, jagged teeth, and he's all red, and I think that's a really cool look. People have problems with Jason being like 7 foot tall or whatever. That's Ken something plays Jason in that film.
Starts with an F. I don't remember what it is, but yeah.
And Brad Laree actually talked. They're friends.
Right.
So that's kind of wild. And I guess they did come out in the back-to-back years. So there was some camaraderie there. But I think, for me, if I could have had any choice, I would have loved to see Jason versus Michael. But what are you gonna? Nobody's gonna talk in that film. So let's
talk about that for a second. Would you be interested in seeing Michael versus Pinhead? I've heard that before, which I think is a terrible idea. I would never want to see that film. But let's just say they were like, hey, we want to do Michael versus Jason. Would you be down for that?
So I'll say this. I think the kind of what we're heading towards, if I had to guess, is sort of history repeats itself, where we're starting to see more just like these horror movies with these icons that really aren't part of any specific timeline or franchise. We're sort of reverting back to 110 years ago with Frankenstein and Werewolf and these films that, the Universal films that maybe, you could watch in order and it might make sense, but you don't have to. You know who these characters are. So let's see them go head to head. I think a Michael versus Jason movie would be really interesting. I think the thing about Freddy versus Jason is you do have a character who can speak. So at least, you've kind of got your straight man and the comedian. And you wouldn't have that. So you would have to find a way to make Michael and Jason a film where there's going to be dialogue. I mean, it would be tough, but I also think, like, to a degree, they're very similar in their style of fighting or killing. As exciting as the idea is, and as much as I'd love to see two of my favorite horror icons share the screen together, I'm not sure how good of a film it would be. Now, I hope I'm wrong. I hope somebody could come in and make that movie, because we're there night one. But I don't know how you could make that film work. But I'd love to see it. I think, Freddy is kind of a connecting tissue. If they did a movie of what we're talking about tonight, Freddy, Jason, and Michael, now we're talking. That would be something that would be, I think it's a little easier to do, but that's a lot of characters and a lot of fan bases to please with one film. What do you think? Like, could this even happen? Would you want to see it?
I think for me, as much as I love the Halloween franchise and give me Michael, I love Michael Myers. I don't want to see that film. I think that if they were going to do something like that ship sailed in the early 90s, like if you were going to take advantage of two really, powerful big characters in the horror world and you wanted to somehow bring them together, I think that would have been the time to do it. For me right now, trying to here's the thing, like when I look at 80s horror movies and extending into the 90s, you know what I mean? I think there was people just kind of took it at face value. So if you saw a movie that it was sort of goofy, it was a horror movie, but it was sort of goofy at the same time, and there was these really weird creatures or whatever, people just sort of took it at face value and that scared them. Now I think because society is fucking scary, I think it's really hard to scare people. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's tough to scare people. So to take those two franchises and to try to merge them, I don't think it would work. And I am not a fan of Freddy versus Jason. I never really I have it on DVD. Couldn't tell you the last time I watched it. I bet it's been at least a decade. It just was not, I feel like that was in the era, kind of the end of the era, but still in the era where you had, 29-year-olds who were supposed to be playing 17-year-olds. And it's like, that's not believable. I mean, that was the same thing with the Friday the 13th remake, where it was like you had these high school kids going to the lake, and it's like, that dude right there, he looks like he got gray hair already. Why is he playing a high school kid? I mean, that's the kind of stuff that I feel like we were dealing with at a certain point, like late 90s. It started out with really, I mean, even like the Scream era, I think that was a little bit better because they were still younger, but like Scream, and I know some, these are characters who are 26, 27, 28 years old. They're playing high schoolers. It's just not believable in my mind. So I'm not a fan of Freddy versus Jason. I don't mind it. I mean, if somebody's like, hey, you want to watch Freddy versus Jason? I'd be like, okay, sure. That's cool. Like, I don't mind, but it's never a movie that I would go out of my way to watch. And if it's a movie that I never see again for the rest of my life, I'll be like, okay, cool, whatever. As much as I love my boy Michael, and give me more Michael. There's a lot of people who want the franchise to die. There's a lot of people who want the franchise just to be over with. They're saying, hey, you've kicked the horse enough. It's dead. Dude, give me more Michael, but don't give me Michael versus Jason. Don't give me Michael versus Freddy. That's kind of where I'm at personally. These icons go toe to toe in the box office, then toe to toe on the screen. If that makes sense. Like, give me a Friday the 13th movie next year. The following year, give me a new Halloween film. The following year, give me a new Nightmare on Elm Street, and just boom, 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 right? Just like you had in the 80s. I would much rather see that version 2.0 than try to make something out of nothing.
Yeah, I think I agree. And to a degree, it kind of, it would ruin parts of all of the franchises for me, knowing that, in Springfield, Freddy's tearing apart teenagers in their sleep, but in another town, still in the Midwest, Michael's doing the same kind of thing. I don't know. It's just, I think the idea of them being alone in their universes respectively makes them special. I think they picked the best two that you could grab to make their connected universes make sense. We've introduced the kind of supernatural element in both of those films, and Halloween, outside of Halloween 3, really doesn't bring anything supernatural into the franchise. I think it made sense for Jason and Michael.
You don't cross that line.
No, and I think it made sense for those two where it wouldn't so much with Michael. And like you're saying, give me every Michael Myers movie you can, but that's not what I would want at all.
I will say, I think if you were to, again, I love my boy Mike. I love him all day long. He's my favorite. I think if you were to match him up against Freddy or Jason, dude, I hate to say it, but I think he's going down because I think Jason by the end of that franchise, zombie. I mean, how do you kill something that's already dead? And you got Freddy, who is this supernatural, living in your nightmares, can, fuck you up from, your brain out, right? I mean, he's unless you somehow bring him out of that dream world, which is how he always dies, right? I mean, he always gets brought out of the dream world. Like, you can't kill him because you can't kill something that's in your dreams. So that's to me, respect to Michael Myers. I like to think of Michael as a human. Like, I don't like to think of him as this supernatural being. So that's where I do think if you were to make that movie, unfortunately, I think Michael's getting TKO'd in like the third round because I just don't see him being able to match up with the brutality. Maybe like Tyler Mane's Michael, different story. I think Tyler Mane's Michael Myers could go up against, like Kane Hodder, right? I mean, in like Halloween, in Friday the 13th part 7 or 8, I think you could get that, make that move. But I think if you're taking like the Nick Castle, Michael Myers, 1978, very human version of him, I think Jason Voorhees is 100% kicking his ass. And a Mike or in Freddy, you can't fight something that's in your dreams. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's a super unfair fight, even though I think Michael is the godfather of all these guys, and he's big daddy to these two other guys who are still huge and super important in my life. I don't think he wins in that battle. You got, like you're saying, man versus more than man. And it's not very interesting when you bring it to that. Now, if they rebooted all the franchises right now, I don't know if it would work with Freddy still, but if you brought Jason to be back to just a redneck in the woods, maybe that would be a little bit more interesting. I don't know.
I agree. If it was like Nick Castle, Halloween 1978 versus like Ted White's Jason from part 4, yeah, you might be able to, they might be able to go the full 10 rounds. I think that could be, that could be possible. But yeah, once he becomes a zombie, like there's, you're not fighting a zombie Jason. And that's the thing, like, that's where, as much as like I love that look of Jason, like probably my favorite look, as much as I don't like the film, my favorite look of Jason is A New Blood. Like, I love that he just came up out of the lake. He's like, his freaking ribs are sticking through his shirt and his hands are bony. And, at one point his mask gets broke off his face or something. And you get that classic zombie Jason look. That's my favorite look of Jason by far. I love that. But how do you fight that? You can't fight that. And that's, my boy Mike, he's probably going down if you're going up against that, as would anybody. Right. So that, yeah, I think he's getting his ass kicked for sure. Unfortunately, doesn't mean he's not still the dominant, at least in our mind, the dominant franchise, because I would take a Halloween film over any of those, even though I love them. Like we talked about, we're going to do a Friday the 13th day. I'd be down for doing a Nightmare on Elm Street day. That would be fun too. But give me more Michael. Just not personally. Yeah. Don't give me Michael versus Jason. Not happening.
Yeah, I agree. And as we're talking, I know we're kind of past this, but I do want to bring up one important thing that is different between Michael and Jason is with Michael, you get sort of this kind of Reaper-esque figure who's very methodical, quick with his kills. He's in and out, and then he's moving on, and he's moving slow, and his head turns. There's no emotion. They make a big point to show that Michael doesn't have emotion, whereas Jason, even though a lot of people think of him as a very similar character, he's running, he's taking his mask off and freaking people out with his effed up face. I mean, he's got emotion. He's got more wherewithal than Mike, and I think, like, if I had to go toe to toe with one of them, first of all, I'm dying either way. But if I had to go toe to toe with him, I think I'd rather go Michael because,
Right.
I could run, not well. I'm fat and asthmatic, so that would not go well. But Jason can run too, and he lives in the woods. He probably runs fast, man. Like the guy is like a survivor, man.
Absolutely. He's eating like raw deer meat, and like that's what he's surviving on. He lives in the woods. Michael's become a little bit of a Sally. He's only eating dogs. I mean, that's like a pet. He can't. What are you getting out of that? Jason is absolutely going after these wild animals and wrestling them down with his hands. So yeah, nobody's surviving that. Nobody is surviving Jason.
No, and that is one thing about the remake. I think the 2009 remake of Friday the 13th might be, and this is tough because I do love Rob Zombie's remake, but I now have like problems as it become like a Halloween prude or whatever. I now have problems with that film showing the background. I think the Friday the 13th remake might be the best out of the 3 remakes of those franchises. One thing that I really like about that film is they made Jason kind of this survivalist who he's using a bow and arrow. He's living in the woods. He's kind of crafted his own like underground hut, which is probably like the weirdest part of that movie. But he's really like, he's in the woods, man. You don't really get a lot of that with the original films, but it makes sense and it brings it to a scarier level when now Jason's got bear traps set up. Like it fits the character and it works. And, I think that is an element that if they, make another movie or if they do this TV show, I really want to see that kind of stuff because that is a huge differentiator between him and the Boogeyman.
Yeah, that's a great point. They made, Jason was, I don't want to say smart, but he was smarter in the remake. He had some advanced skills. He'd been almost like pre-planning a little bit, waiting for some, pot smoking teenage kids to invade his space, and he was going to light them up like Macaulay Culkin in Home Alone.
I forgot that the whole point of that is that Jason's got a weed farm. Never mind. I take back what I said about the that one being the best. Shit. Never mind. I gotta revisit that film. I forgot when that movie came out. And
back to Rob Zombie. Rob Zombie, he's still got it. He's the man, I guess.
Yeah, I guess. But that was the spoiler that like came out first. I was big on, if anybody here was big on Fright stuff back in the day, hit me up because that was an awesome time. But the Fright stuff community, which was this Jason Friday the 13th community forum, the night of the drop, I still wasn't old enough to go see it that night. But one of my buddies on the forum came back and he goes, the whole reason the teens are there is because Jason has a marijuana farm. And I was like, no way, dude. How is that? It makes sense in the context of the film. And Jason probably wasn't out there irrigating the crops, making sure, they were well, fought off from predators or whatever. But, it's just when you put it on paper like that, it's a tough plot line for a franchise that means so much.
I kind of like the Nightmare on Elm Street remake. Not a big fan of the Friday the 13th remake. I'm not a big fan of the Halloween remake, but I would choose that one personally over those other two, just because I think that for me it's just because it's a Halloween film, to be honest with you. Like, I think they're all shit, but if I'm going to pick one, I'm going to pick one that at least I really, truly like love that franchise. And I think that's probably why I do it. But yeah, dude, I think it's really interesting to compare the three. They're so similar, but so different at the same time. And what do you guys think? Let us know in the comments. What do you guys think? Number one, I want to know, who do you think is going to win? Are we full of shit? Is Michael Myers going to dominate, or are we onto something? Is it going to be really tough to beat Jason? Is it going to be really tough to beat Freddy? What do you guys think? Do you guys think that he could go toe-to-toe, that Michael could go toe-to-toe with these guys? Let us know in the comments because we'd love to hear it. Dude, we are 1 week away from our very first live episode. And I can't wait. I know we obviously touched on it at the beginning of the episode, but I want to make sure that before we close out, we do talk about that again, because it's going to be so important. So the way that it's going to work, if you guys have already sent us your email address, you're good to go. We're going to try to get everybody on the show. We promise you, if we got to stay up until 3:00 in the morning, we're going to try to get everybody on the show. We have nowhere to be. Austin and I think we mentioned this. Austin and I are going to be traveling. We're going to be in the Midwest. We're in the Midwest now, but we're going to be going somewhere else in the Midwest. We're actually going to be investigating a super haunted old poor farm the next night. So we might do some live stream stuff, maybe a little bit on Instagram or something like that the night after. But if you have already sent us your email address, we promise you that we'll get to you. But here's the deal. You guys send us your email address. We are going to send you an email a few days before. So probably like Wednesday of this week or of next week, I should say. I'm sorry. Wednesday of next week. So like, what would that be? Like the 5th? Well, you'll get an email on the 5th, and then you'll also get an email the night of the show, and you will get the link for that you can log in right away. Again, 9 p.m. Eastern, we're going to get everybody in the room. We're going to chat. We're going to have some fun. The drinks, I'm sure, will be flowing. It's just going to be a fun, super fun night. We are going to be broadcasting live from a hotel room. So that is the one challenge that we're still trying to figure out a little bit, making sure that the Wi-Fi is going to be good, that we've got good lighting and all that good stuff. It may look shitty, but hey, you got us. What more do you need from Halloween Lives than just the two of us? So we're really, really excited to be talking to you guys. And dude, I've been looking forward to this episode, like doing the Live 25 thing. I've been looking forward to that for weeks now, because when we decided that we were going to do it, it was like, oh shit, that's going to be awesome. We've got some guests returning guests who are going to pop in and say hi. Super, super stoked, dude.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things where I'm excited for a couple of reasons, and one is obviously I'm already so stoked at the number of people that want to be a part of the live show next week, that even if there were no guests, even if we had nothing else planned, I'm excited for that, because it's kind of like a mini H45 for us. I get to talk to, and you get to talk to other people who are just as serious about this shit as we are. And for 99% of our lives, dude, it's been you and I saying the same, our opinions back and forth at each other. So it's going to be really fun to kind of talk to people that, there's almost guaranteed going to be some Halloween Ends haters in there.
That's going to be that's going to be, I can't wait to tell everybody why they're wrong about Halloween Ends. No, I'm just kidding. We are, I'm sure that you're right. I'm sure there's going to be people who are like, dude, you guys are fucking nuts, man. Halloween Ends sucks. And we can be like, you're wrong, but thank you for joining our program. Click. Exactly. No, I'm just kidding. We won't do that.
No, but it's good to like get spotlight on the show of those people that have different opinions. Right. And it's so fun. And then we got some guys that are familiar and friends of the show that are going to be back here. And I'm really looking forward to seeing them, talking to them, catching up since the last time we've talked. I don't know, man. It's going to be like a little party, and I'm pumped. And usually the horror weirdos, we're not the kids you invite to the party. So now this is our own. We're doing our own freaking thing, and you can do your own thing. It's going to be a lot of fun.
It's a Halloween hangout, baby. It's a Halloween hangout, and it is going to be a blast. So if you guys would like to be on the show with us, if you'd like to come on, chat with us, tell us why we're dirtballs, whatever you want to say to us, completely uncensored that night. We're not going to have somebody monitoring and make sure that you don't call us dirtbags or shitheads or anything like that. So if you want to be on the show with us and you want to give us grief, or you want to actually talk to us and have a little bit of an interaction about different movies, the franchise, whatever it is that you want to talk about. Hell, if you want to talk about some other obscure horror movie that we haven't seen, dude, we're all for it. So if you guys want to be on the show, please, please, please hit us up. Send us a DM at halloween.lives.podcast on Instagram. Give us your email address. We'll get you added to the list. We'll get you an email sent out on July 5th, and then you'll get another one the day of the show, which is July 7th. So, guys, please hit us up. We'd love to talk to you. Love to chat. This is going to wrap up episode number 24. We talked about Michael versus Freddy versus Jason. Who would win? Who is the dominant franchise? We know who it is. It's Halloween because Halloween lives forever. My name is Blaine Duncan. I'm your host. That's my co-host, Austin. Thank you guys for joining us, and we'll see you next week, baby, for Halloween Live 25. We'll see you then.